Civil rights organizations are the groups in the country that you would expect to be the most in favor of freedom, of justice, of equality. But according to a news story published in The Intercept by Li Fong, that's actually not the case when it comes to the issue of net neutrality. So he states, leading civil rights groups who for many years have been heavily bankrolled by the telecom industry are signaling their support for Donald Trump's promised rollback of the Obama administration's net neutrality rules, which prevent internet service providers from prioritizing some content providers over others. In a little notice joint letter released last week, the NAACP, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, OCA, formerly known as the Organization for Chinese Americans, the National Urban League, and other civil rights organizations sharply criticized the jurisdictional and classification problems that plagued the last FCC, a reference to the legal mechanism used by the Obama administration to accomplish net neutrality. Instead of classifying broadband as a public utility, the letter states open internet rules should be written by statute. What does that mean? It means the Republican-led Congress should take control of the process, the precise approach that is favored by industry. None of the civil rights groups that signed the joint letter responded to a request for comment. Last week's letter was organized by Multicultural Media, Telecom and Internet Council, a group funded by the telecom industry that has previously encouraged civil rights groups to oppose net neutrality. MMTC in previous years reported receiving about a third of its budget from industry-sponsored events. Its annual summit, which was held last week, was made possible by $100,000 in sponsorships from Comcast and AT&T, as well as a $75,000 sponsorship from Charter Communications and Verizon. MMTC, which acts on the needs of telecom lobbyists, has been accused of AstroTurf lobbying by creating the appearance of grassroots support for the industry. The civil rights group opposed to net neutrality have employed several arguments against the proposal. In one filing made in 2010, the NAACP signed onto an agreement from MMTC that net neutrality reforms were a waste of resources because the FCC should focus on more pressing racial discrimination and exclusionary hiring and promotion practices of certain Silicon Valley high-tech companies. In a separate filing in 2014, MMTC and the NAACP argued that reclassification would threaten the fragile state of minority engagement in the digital ecosystem. Kim Keenan, the president of MMTC, the group that organized the joint letter, has showered Pai with praise. He is really focused on closing the digital divide as an advocate. I feel so much pride that this is a priority for his chairmanship, Keenan told Multi-Channel News, a trade outlet. So they're harming people who they're claiming to fight for. This is unbelievable. Now, the question here is, why the hell would the NAACP and these organizations who we love and look up to and who have done great work in the past, why would they be in favor of this? Well, with all things in government, follow the money. So while advocating against net neutrality, the organizations on the joint letter have raked in money from the telecom industry. The NAACP, which signed letters opposing net neutrality both times the rule was proposed by the Obama administration, has named AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast as corporate fundraising partners. After the NAACP endorsed Comcast's merger with NBC, Comcast disclosed that the NAACP was one of the recipients of $1.8 billion in funds doled out to various community groups. The Asian American groups on the letter, including OCA and Americans Advancing Justice, have similar ties to the largest telecom firms, Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, and the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, a trade group for the telecom industry. They're listed as members of the Corporate Alliance of Donors funding AAJC. Comcast and Verizon sponsored OCA's annual gala last year. National Urban League received $1.2 million from Verizon in 2014 alone. As the Center for Public Integrity reported, senior officials from AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast have held positions on the National Urban League's board. So I found this to be one of the most disappointing stories to come out of 2017 so far, because these are organizations that I look up to. I mean, we could be objective and say that in spite of this horrible move, they've done such great things in the past. This just shows that money can corrupt even the most altruistic organizations or seemingly altruistic organizations. So here's what we do. If money really gets them to make decisions and reach policy positions, then I think that what you need to do is, if you're funding these organizations, if you're donating to them, withdraw your money, cancel your monthly donations to them because they don't deserve it. And maybe if enough people do this, that'll get them to pay attention. And when you cancel your donation, you need to tell them, I'm canceling specifically because you're against net neutrality. This would harm the people who are the most disadvantaged because we get our news from the internet when the mainstream media, they don't want to cover certain things. So if you make it so that way Comcast can limit the bandwidth to websites that are speaking out against shitty things that the government and the telecommunications industry are doing, then you're literally limiting information. That harms democracy. So this is honestly just a horrific story to me. And look, I'm really glad that Li Fang was able to point this out, because I think that regardless if we respect these institutions for what they've done, this is completely wrong. This has to stop. Put pressure on them, reach out to them, email them, go on Facebook. Look, they have to listen because this cannot stand. They have a huge influence, and if they're going to use that power to do horrible things that screw over the people who they're supposed to be supporting, then it's time that we rein them in.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.